Welcome to another episode of On My Couch. My co-host Sue and I started this a couple of years ago, and really the purpose was to learn more, to talk with interesting people about what they do, and hopefully learn a little bit more about what they do, and then bring that into our professional lives and sometimes into our personal lives as well, based on some of the conversations that we have. So intent today of On My Couch is really just to have a really open conversation. We've been joined by Annalee, and I'll introduce Annalee in a minute, but maybe Sue, why don't you start off? Why don't you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Damien. And for someone who said he wasn't going to go off script, straight into it off script. And of course, these aren't scripted. But
Yes.
good morning, Sue, Annalee. I happen to be related to Damien. My professional career has been 30 plus years in shopping centre management, retail, marketing. I'm currently doing, I think, probably what they call a portfolio career, where I do a little bit of everything at the moment. So I have great flexibility, and looking forward to our conversation this morning. So thanks, Damien.
Terrific. And just going back on script, Sue, thank you for that. So my name is Damien O'Malley, founder of OMC Group, and what we do leadership, we do strategy, we do culture, but fundamentally what we do is we actually help people work better together. That's the purpose. That's what we try and do. OMC Group is the organisation, and this year we've actually been going for 12 years, which is pretty sensational, and we get to meet really great people across different industries. And a number of years ago now, I had the opportunity to meet Annalee, and Annalee's going to talk more about her role and her career. And one of the things that we wanted to do was to, as I said, to really learn more about different people and different expertise. So Annalee, I'm going to introduce you, and I'm going to get you to add to the story here. But Annalee's the founder and managing director of Nolan Media Events, and also plays a key role with the Australian Hotels Association, Accommodation Association of Australia, and also Rutherglen Wine. Have I got that right, Annalee?
Winemakers of Rutherglen, yes.
Yeah, beautiful. Maybe introduce yourself and tell us more about who you are, and thank you so much for joining us on the couch as well.
Oh, thanks, Damien. Thanks, Sue. Thanks for having me along. I think it was about 12 years ago we crossed paths, Damien. Oh, sorry, about 6 years ago we crossed paths, Damien, was it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, I've been joined by a guest there as well, which is terrific. I'm regionally based, located up in Wangaratta in northeast Victoria. I have a small business, Nolan Media Events, and we contract into a number of clients, one being the AHA, who I've had the pleasure of working with for about close to 20 years now. So that's been a long-standing relationship. We're predominantly event management focused, but over the years, my role has spread more into board management, project management, special events and special projects as they sort of come across the table. So I have got a couple of staff members. We work across a couple of clients together, but lucky to be regionally based and still be able to deliver the projects and the events that we do.
Terrific. And that was one of the reasons, or a number of reasons, why we wanted to get you on our couch. But the topics we're keen to explore today a little bit more were that how is it that you go about, what are the insights, what are the challenges, what are the opportunities in terms of running a national business from a regional location, and keen to hear more about how that happened, and obviously pre-COVID and post-COVID, and then similarly events, given one of your core expertise is around events, and again how have they evolved and changed again pre and post-COVID as well. So that's sort of, and also just interested in terms of your experience and reflections on your career as well. So Sue, I might hand over to you to take this next part.
All right, thank you. So Annalee, tell us how you got started. Like, how did you end up in media and events? What was the genesis?
Well, the media part's probably a little bit of a fallacy. It's that was when I started my business. My father was based up here in Wangaratta, and he had just finished a 30-something or 40-something year career in media. So he was sort of the media aspect of what we sort of came to the market with. He's since retired. But from an events perspective, so I don't think event management was even a course when I went to university. It sort of came on thick and fast, didn't it? over the years. But really events for me, I guess I've done a lot of traveled the world, spent a lot of time abroad, and but then within Australia, we're predominantly working in hospitality, you know, as you do when you travel around and in pubs and hotels. And I sort of just started to fall into some of the in-house events, activations and things that were happening, particularly when I was living in Darwin in the Northern Territory. Probably my first real taste of an event up there was when Powderfinger came to town, and I was asked to play host to them whilst they were in town, and just started to do a few things up there. And then when I relocated back down to Victoria, I fell into a job with Andrew McManus Presents. So they tour, or he back in the day would tour international bands around Australia and New Zealand. So that was my real introduction to events. From there, I went across to Hawthorn Football Club for a season or two, and then left there and went to the AHA. So I think that was about 2005. So yeah, been doing it for a long time. Got a great passion for events, but you know, it's been an interesting ride, very, very varied in terms of the scale and size of events that I've worked on. As I said, touring international bands, enjoyed, I think my favorite one was the Andrea Bocelli tour, which was amazing. But yeah, since then done lots of things around lots of large and small corporate events, music festivals, awards nights, you know, dinners, conferences, all sorts of things.
And what skills do you need to draw on to sort of run events? You know, as you say, there wasn't an events course. So what have you learned along the way that actually says these are the top, you know, 5, because I've got 5 fingers, these are the top 5 things that you've got to be super good at when you're an event manager?
It's interesting because I don't think events themselves are rocket science. You know, anyone in my sort of circle of friends can put on a good party, you know, if that's what it is. But it's a lot deeper than that, because it's a real exercise in precision planning around, and it's the 1%ers. You know, you can do 98% of things really well, but if you forget 1 or 2 things, they can have a huge impact on and unpick the whole thing, if you like. And you're relying on a lot of stakeholders and a lot of things. You know, we can plan an event for 10 months and it all has to come together and work for 3 hours. So there's a lot of hands all over that, a lot of fingerprints. And so having really good relationships, working with trusted suppliers. And it's also funny because you can't, with an event, you can't just try again tomorrow. You know, you can't turn up at work and try harder tomorrow because it's done, you know, and it's had an impact, and you want that impact obviously to have been a good one. And I guess when you're working in the corporate space, you have to be really cognizant that you often, like large corporates that we work with, they're basically handing you their brand for that time. You know, they give you their logo, they give you their assets, and they allow you to represent them for a certain period of time. So you have to be really aware of that space and the responsibility that you hold when you take on those large corporate events. So yeah, I don't know if I summed it up in 5 points there, Sue, but they're sort of things that I always sort of think about as I'm going into an event.
And how do you find your clients? Do they find you, or do you have a formula for discovering clients, I suppose?
No, I don't. I guess my sort of, you know, thought pattern is that you're only ever as good as your last event. And we've been lucky enough, as I say, to have worked with the AHA for 20 years almost. With the winemakers of Rutherglen, I've been working with them for quite a number of years now. I've had long-standing relationships with my clients. So I've never actually gone to market and looked for work. And again, I'm based regionally, so there's not as many opportunities, I guess you could say, but just making sure that we do a good job in each and every time, so that we're kept on the job and we retain those contracts and those relationships.
Damien, that's probably a good segue to the regional location piece.
Yeah, and I think so. That was one of the things we wanted to explore a little bit, and then Annalee, when Sue and I were doing our prep for this conversation, you know, I said, you know, Annalee's based in, you know, we'll talk about Wang, and Sue's response was, "What's Wang?" So maybe you can, one, answer that question, and then two, you know, how do you go about, because, you know, you did just highlight then that there's some challenges in terms of, you know, running a business from a regional location. So, but you run a national business. So just curious about how do you go about managing a business with a national scope from a regional location?
Look, I feel like the rest of the world's just catching on. They've caught on to my little secret because I was lucky enough back in 2010, I think it was, my CEO at the AHA in Victoria at the time, Brian Carney, when I relocated back to Wangaratta, which is where I was originally from, said to me, you know, why don't we just turn, because I was an employee at the time at the AHA in Vic, he said, why don't we just turn you into a contractor and you can still deliver your role from there. So he had that foresight, you know, all that time ago. And I don't, you know, we weren't Zooming, we weren't Teams meeting and all that sort of stuff. We were, you know, it was based on a solid work ethic and relationship and, you know, a consistent approach to just delivering. You've got to, obviously, when you live regionally, plan, you know, to be, because you're not always available in a metro location. The Albury Airport's good for me. It's only 45 minutes down the road, but then, you know, a day trip to Melbourne down and back's not uncommon either. So with the right amount of planning and, you know, and as long as you keep on delivering and keep those relationships and be a really effective communicator with all the clients, you know, be present, make sure they've got a good understanding of where you're at, and so that they're not worried or needing to ask questions, you know, ahead of you being already giving them the answers, I think is really important.
Cool. And we've had a couple of conversations with different people in regional areas. You know, Mary from Gippsland, and Sue. We'd also talked with Linda from One Runway about, you know, growing businesses from a regional location. I mean, what are there benefits in terms of your business and in you know, in terms of being based regionally, either outside of Melbourne or outside of Sydney or the Eastern Seaboard?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the work lifestyle balance, and that's been really important for me. I've got 2 teenage daughters now who obviously weren't always teenagers, and the demands of having little children. And my girls are very sporty, and they've got a million things going on at any given time. So just being able to maintain that balance between delivering, you know, high quality events and high quality work for my clients, but not having the travel time that comes with living in the city, as well, cost of living pressures that come with living in the city. So yeah, they're probably key benefits that you know, that have really worked well for me being based regionally.
Yeah, cool. And you also mentioned the fact that you were, thanks to the former CEO of the Australian Hotels Association, you're a bit of a leader, right, in terms of actually working remotely and not being physically in the office. So to what extent do you think, as you know, when COVID was a major impact for a whole range of reasons, but has that helped, do you think, the fact that, you know, the impact of COVID in terms of workplaces, has that made what you do more, you know, I don't know, more accessible, not more accessible, but more acceptable?
As I say, I've been working on this model for years, so it probably didn't change too much for me. I think it's an interesting one now, and obviously I think the flexible working policies that businesses have now, I think, is interesting because I have an office here in Wangaratta, so my staff and I, you know, have a place to go to. That's where we work from. But yeah, working from home, you know, you need to be pretty, you know, driven and motivated, available, accessible, all those sort of things. So I don't know how large businesses are going post-COVID with their flexible working policies and people, you know, having this expectation or desire to now work from home and how that works with teams. I haven't experienced that in a large sort of business setting. Yep. Yeah, but as I said, we have an office here that we still go to. And I've been doing this for so long, it was sort of all quite normal to me.
Cool. Now, I know Sue's going to talk in a minute and shift the focus onto events, but before we go there, I just wanted to sort of go back, and you mentioned a couple of people, clients that you work with, but you know, who's, you know, what's been your, you know, what are you most proud of, or what's been the biggest achievement in terms of some of the clients that you've been, you know, some of the events? Is there one event that sticks out? You know, Sue's going to ask the questions in a minute about events, but is there one event that sticks out over the journey? You think, hey, that was just an unreal experience, and I'm so lucky, and I can't believe I had the opportunity to be part of that event.
Oh, I'd like to think all of them, I'd have to say.
All of your clients are saying, pick mine, pick mine, pick mine.
Look, there's probably a bit of a wow moment when we hosted. Were you at the AHA Awards in Sydney, the National Awards in
Yes.
Sydney, Damon? Yeah, that was probably a bit of a wow moment because we had hosted this national awards event down on Sydney Harbour. We had, the Qantas Choir. That was probably the moment for me, with all the gorgeous Qantas Choir kids singing, their songs, with the backdrop being the bridge and Sydney, the Opera House. And that was but conversely, that was also one of the craziest events that I've done, because it was that managing the awards component and aspect of that event was really challenging. But from a setting perspective and a goosebump moment, probably that one stands out in recent years.
Yeah, and it was a stunning, beautiful afternoon and evening, wasn't it? It was just perfect.
It was, and I don't know if you remember or if you were there, but the day before it bucketed down, like the heavens opened up, and at exactly the time that we would have been starting the event the following day. So it was a sleepless 24 hours. But yeah, we did get there.
Yeah, cool. Sue, do you want to talk more about sort of events?
Yeah, I mean, that sounds amazing. I think that Qantas Choir would have sent sort of had your hairs on the back of your neck standing up, I'm sure, and such a classic environment. But of course, it's not always that's what your guests would see. And you mentioned that was one of the craziest events. What are some of the things that you go from behind the scenes that you need to consider in terms of non-negotiables as far as events are concerned, or aspects of events that the guests don't see that you've absolutely got to nail?
Oh, I think it's everything. So you know what it's like? It's my worst. One of the things I'm not good at is running around at events, and I've got the headset on, and all I can hear is the back of house operations and everything that could go wrong or might be going wrong. And then I'm seeing clients face to face and I'm saying, hi, oh, great, how are you? And I'm thinking, oh my God, the balance of actually trying to keep, both sides working. You have to work with trusted people that you've got good relationships and that you have trust in, so from a supplier selection perspective, making sure you've got the right people, making sure, all of the team know. And because it's a minute by minute proposition, or your run sheets will be in 30-second blocks or minutes, and and there's a significant flow on effect from one to the other. So and as I said, it's things change and evolve, and it's one of those things too where you sort of plan for this whole event to go right, but you have to also have planned for all the things that could go wrong, that you hope never eventuate, but you've always got that contingency, and you always sort of know, okay, if this happens, this is what we do. And so, the risk management side of events has exploded, I think, in recent years. There's a lot more emphasis on that for public events and for corporate events, but particularly public events. So having a keen eye for detail around that side of thing is a bit of a non-negotiable, I have to say.
I've noticed that having done a few events myself, you've almost got to have eyes in the back of your head, because there's one thing to have this great run sheet, and then someone decides that they might add value for you and do something different or what have you, and it's that sort of domino effect that it has, and I think that was one for me. It's almost like you're right. You've got the earpiece in, you're chatting away. If I haven't got a care in the world, but in the meantime, you're going, person out the back, if they don't stop doing that in a minute, I'm going to have to go and have a call. And I agree with you. The risk management. The other one that's caused is quite different now. Is the dietaries that you have to need to consider at events. And I think, how do you manage all of that when you're talking on the risk management side, you've got a huge event. How do you manage sort of going, oh, hang on, have we factored everything in here, as you said, for everything that could go wrong?
Oh, absolutely. And that's where the use, I remember like years and years ago, if I'd be doing an event at Crown, say for 1,000 people, I might send through half a dozen dietaries, and now I'm sending through 2 pages worth.
Wow.
And they're so varied, and things that each year there's something else that you've never heard of, and you have to sort of work out what that means. And that's back to those 1%ers that I talked about, get the wrong dietary to the wrong person, and you could have done everything else right for this event, but that's a real problem, So yeah, obviously we try and make sure you've got good software systems in place that capture all of those details, even though they seem so minor at the front end. At the back end, when they actually play out as a live thing in an event, it, you know, has a huge impact. So yeah, that's a good example, Sue, of where things, you know, have exploded. And there's an ever increasing kind of demand for the detail to just be addressed, you know, at every particular event. So yeah, you do have to be right onto those things. I remember one time, you know, and it's, you know, as I said, there's so many fingerprints. By the time you get to event delivery, there's fingerprints all over these things, and it's been your baby that you've held and nurtured for you know, months and months and months on end, and then you're kind of handing it over for everyone else to hold, and it's really nerve-wracking, and can come down to a simple thing. Like, I remember one time, I think it was like a year or two ago, you know, the stage hand was getting a singer for me, and you know, I'm relying on the production people and everyone's working together, but I think the battery dropped out on the stage hand's headset, and took this performer to the wrong stage, and we announced it, lights went on, and there's no performer there, you know. Thankfully, by the time we announced her for the second time, she was amazing and blew the crowd away, so everybody forgot about it pretty quickly. But you know, those sort of things that leave you feeling pretty red-faced. So as you say, making sure, yeah, you're listening to everything that's going on in the background, whilst often having a meeting or greeting a minister, or you know, with and portraying this everything's totally fine behind the scenes sort of facade.
So what's the most surprising request then you've had in terms of your event career from a client?
I'm going to throw myself under the bus here and say probably the most surprising request I've had was when I was asked to do an event again after the year before, leading a group to a swimming hole in the Northern Territory where there was a crocodile found in it, actually, later on. And when I got the gig again, I was a little bit surprised. I guess they thought it was out of my control. But look, as I said, I've been working with my.
Did you plan for the crocodile to be there though? Like
no, I didn't. But and funnily enough, I left on a red eye that night because I was heavily pregnant with my second daughter, and I left. The tour was kind of finishing. I left, and it wasn't. And we'd been swimming. Everyone would be there saying, "Jump in, you'll be fine. You don't disregard those signs. That's for the wet season." Everyone knows in the dry season, these swimming holes are totally fine. They've been cleared. And then the next day on the front of the Northern Territory newspaper, it was, you know, Wongi Falls closed due to, you know, 5 meter croc found or whatever. Yeah. But as I said, I've been working with my clients for a long time. So I have a good feel for, and I think that's part of the, you know, part of the magic too, is I have a really good feel for all the players and all the stakeholders, and you know, where all the bodies are buried, and I know, you know, who needs certain things at certain times. So I don't generally have too many surprises, you know, at this point in my career, but yeah, I'm sure over the years there's been a lot, you know, some that I might have deliberately forgotten, perhaps.
Oh dear, yeah, it's certainly you can't, as you identified, you've got to be a really great planner, but sometimes if something untoward happens and it's totally, I've had guests turn up where they decided they've RSVP'd them, but then they've decided at the last minute they'll bring their wife with them, and of course you don't have a seat for their wife or their partner at the table, and you can't fit them on because, and so it's that whole thing, okay, well, I can't, don't want to offend this person, but how am I going to manage this sort of thing? So it's that thinking it's probably the biggest skill set.
Yeah, the problem solving, you know, and doing it with style and grace, and so that less, you know, it's less obvious, or it's less, you know, off-putting, or you know, I've had I remember once at our national awards, a whole table, like I think it was, they'd sent 8 people over from I don't know, from a different state or territory. They'd flown over, they were so excited, they'd bought their tickets, but they hadn't actually nominated, you know, so they didn't see themselves in any of it. So, you know, things like that can be, you know, costly and upsetting, and you just got to be able to manage people's, you know, expectations from the outset, but then, you know, once something does happen, yeah, just be able to walk them through it and sort of support with whatever it is.
Cool. So do you want me to ask a question?
Yeah,
cool. So Thank you. So we've started talking about what you do and how you do it, and also the benefits and the challenges of a regional location. So I'm going to ask you to cast your mind back a little bit. We've been really fortunate to be joined by some really super talented people, including yourself, on our respective couches. So we sort of touched on this a little bit, but I'm going to ask you to get reflective for a minute. If you look back on your career, and we talked about your achievements, the biggest insight. So what's the thing that you wish that you knew, that now that you wished you knew 20 years ago? If you think about, we're going to ask you to be a little bit reflective and
I'm sure I knew everything 20 years ago, didn't we all? I knew everything from a teenager.
Is that your response to your teenage daughters now?
Exactly. That's why it's so front of mind for me. What do I know now?
Or what would be the advice for someone that says, "Hey, I want to do what you do"? What would be the advice that you'd give them? That's the sort of the angle that I'm going for here.
I guess some advice that I took on early, and I remember receiving early, was when I was at Hawthorn and the Hawthorn Football Club, and the CEO there, Ian Robson, he used to always talk to us. There was a lot of focus around what sort of brand of football the players were playing, but there was also a lot of mentorship and conversation with the staff around building your own brand, and being really clear about who you are, what you stand for, what you want to be known for, your personal brand of work and work ethic. So from that perspective, as I said, I sort of rolled into events through hospitality. And I don't know that I necessarily thought every time I poured a beer or took out a meal or showed up for my shifts at work that I was building towards something, through the level of work that I was doing, the relationships that I was building, the initiative that I was showing, or the capability that I was showing. That all just led me down a path of opportunity. So I guess it's just around whatever you're doing it well, because you are on a pathway, whether it's obvious to you or not. And good people, good work ethic, it all does get noticed by employers. I think a lot of the time, particularly when I'm employing people now, I certainly look for somebody who's the right cultural fit, over and above technical skill or expertise or experience, because I know that I can teach that. But you want good people that you can work with, and that are going to care as much about your clients as I do. I think that's the critically important piece. So I guess from 20 years ago to now, or thereabouts, it's just that, it's that taking care and being really clear about your own brand, and how people are going to see and perceive you, and being really clear about what you stand for, and then going into the workspace with that kind of mindset.
Yeah, good. That's great. That's really, really good advice. And similar sort of question, if you're looking back, is there something that you wish you had done more of or less of?
I think I quite quickly worked out in my events career that I wanted to do less. I wasn't ever going to be very good in the not-for-profit space, because I'm terrible at asking people for things. So fundraising just wasn't really for me. I don't like asking for things. I'm more of a giver. So I sort of, steered clear of those style of events. So I started doing less of that as soon as I could. I probably capability building and confidence building around public speaking is something. I recently completed the AICD course, and I found that to be really beneficial. It's given me a great insight into boards and the working of boards, and so it's making me a much better executive, because just in terms of the reporting and being really clear around how boards and committees and associations need to work. So probably the and it might just be a byproduct of being busy and all of those sort of things. But if you say, what could I have done more of? Probably, confidence and capability around public speaking, I would say, because that often comes with the territory in terms of media inquiries and, you know, and again, just working for boards. So yeah, getting a little bit more confident around that side of my skill set,
Awesome.
you know, is probably a priority.
Great. We could keep going, and I've got lots more questions, but really conscious of your time and Sue's time. So Annalee, thank you so much. Really enjoyed the discussion today. And certainly got me thinking about a number of different things. And Sue, what did today's discussion get you thinking about?
I liked the concept of the 1%ers. I think that's, you know, that's a sensational piece of advice. You can get it all, you know, just there, but it's that last little piece that you need to focus on. And I also thought your point about the personal branding, regardless of your role, whatever you're doing, is just adding to your personal brand. And I'm not sure that people think about that. They sometimes may just think, oh, I'm just doing a job. But I often used to say to people, you're probably someone's dinner table conversation tonight, and how do you want to be spoken about around the dinner table? And that just, when you talked about that personal branding piece, that's the thought that came back into my mind, being, yes, I'm someone's dinner table conversation tonight, and how would I like them to portray me over their dinner?
That's a good way to think about that. What, you know, that's a great way to think about brand, a much more real way of thinking about it, that dinner conversation. So, hey, Annalee, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate you being so open and sharing your expertise and also your story as well. I'm really looking forward to the National AHA Awards in Brisbane in November, so that'll be fun. And fingers crossed that the weather goes well and all the
warm.
Yeah, it'd be nice and warm, which would be great. So thank you so much. Sue, thank you for your time as well. So we really enjoy having these conversations, gives us a chance to learn. So we look forward to bringing you our next edition of On My Couch. In the meantime, if you want to learn more about OMC Group and the work that we do, we help people work better together. Our website is omc-group.com.au, and would love to talk if you want to help your team work better together as well. So, Sue, Annalee, thank you very much.
Thanks, Damien. Thanks, Sue.